Hello, Sensemaker, and welcome to Making Sense of Ourselves, the podcast about the hard work it takes to get to know yourself. My name is Abby Covert, and my pronouns are she and her. As the chief sensemaker at the Sensemakers Club, I have the privilege and honor of hearing from new voices every day on topics ranging from brass tacks information architecture to esoteric philosophical unanswerable questions about life and how hard it is to be a human. For this season of Making Sense of Ourselves, we're trying something new. We're hosting a live recording session for members of the club to contribute to our podcast every month. Each episode, you'll hear me and a group of other people whose perspectives and experiences differ from my own and likely yours. During this episode, you'll hear clips from real members of the Sensemakers Club sharing their thoughts, some off the cuff, some deeply considered. Then you'll be hearing from Alfi after the discussion when he joins me for a debrief. And I assure you, every good host needs a good debrief. We're excited to play with this new format and see where it lands us. Happy listening, Sensemaker. On today's episode, we're talking about values, how we get them, how we live with them, and what it looks like when something in our life starts to feel out of sync with them. We dig into stories about walking away from misaligned jobs, protecting time for ourselves, and the very real tension between wanting to help and needing to rest. Huge thanks to Mike and Jessica for showing up and sharing so openly in this conversation. This episode actually felt really tender to me. Values aren't just personal, they're foundational, and talking about them publicly takes courage. I think what made this space feel so safe and honest was the shared practice that many of us have built through months, or even now going on more than a year, of participating in Sensemakers Club discussions. It's that muscle memory of reflection and real talk. Stick around after the conversation for my recap with Alfi. All right, on with the show. So I want to start with myself and a little bit of a background on why talking about values really means a lot to me right now, especially at the club. So almost 5 years ago, I left my corporate career to pursue something that was more values aligned. And to be honest, I didn't actually know what that thing would be when I left, but ultimately it led me to creating this club. And I think I created this club because I noticed that coming out of the pandemic, I was really lacking ties in community. Yet community continued to be one of my aspirational values and something that I considered a real success of my past. So before the pandemic, the community was sort of built in for me. And I was consistently invited to things where people would approach me and connections would form. And then all of a sudden I was alone in this office for years on end, and those connections were no longer just a given. So I had to work for them and go looking for them. So this experience really reminded me that sometimes we have to do something really radical, like start a new business or leave the only career we've ever known to do something that's more in line with our values. So I want to ask you to tell us about a value that you have and a time that you had to make a change to better align to that value.
I think that the best example for me was leaving a job to go to a different job where I was sort of recruited to go to it, being in the job for about a week and realizing that it was not the place for me to be. And I spent the next 5 months and 3 weeks looking for a new job. I found something else and it set me back on course. But it was just, I was hired to do something, or I was hired because I was told, oh, your skills will be very valuable to us here. And then when I saw what we were doing, it made me feel physically ill.
Wow. Yeah, I left a job after a day one time. And it was exactly that. I just had the heebie-jeebies about the whole environment. And there was just something about ultimately the mission of what they were trying to do that I couldn't get behind. Jessica, what about you? Did you come up with anything?
Mine is sort of similar to yours, Mike. Forever ago, I had what I think will always be just the worst job I have ever had. I was doing temporary staffing, but the jobs I was recruiting for were entry level industrial jobs. So working on a factory line, and it was temporary workers. So people would just, my customers would call up to order some workers for the weekend because they have some big project they need a few extra hands with. So I had to be on call all the time. My job was Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, but I had to be on call every day of the week from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. So the value I learned was the value of my own personal time, and being in that working situation led me to really draw firm boundaries between work and personal life after leaving that job. I was like, nope, not anymore. Like when the workday is over, and like just honoring my personal time away from the desk and away from work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good one. I feel like that honoring, I think that of myself and taking the time that I need outside of work, like I'm still working on that. Like I had one probably about a year ago. I had some family that was coming in from out of town and I got a speaking engagement offer like for the same time frame. And I was like really thinking, oh, I should take this. Like I don't, these things don't come along all the time and we should get the word out about my work and all this stuff. But it was at the exact same time that my family was going to be in town. And this was family that I don't see very often. And ultimately, like, I couldn't look away from the fact that I would be undervaluing how I feel about my family and like that connection that we have with that limited time if I took the speaking engagement. And so it was really hard to write the email to be like, nope, unavailable. But I did it. And ultimately, like that same client wrote me back and was like, hey, is there any chance that we could just do this in a couple months? And then I ended up getting the gig anyways. So I feel like sometimes when we live into our values, it pays back, like even if we're doing like the harder thing, like what Mike said about, you left the job after just a couple weeks and you were on the market for a couple months, then I'm guessing you got a better job. So one that fit better. So do you think that it is even possible to like live fully into your values all the time, especially in your work? Gut reaction. I see Mike is deep breathing.
Feel like that's kind of a trick question, Abby. Like it feels like an absolute, like you can't like 100% does exist, but I don't think that like it's realistic or reasonable that you're always going to be exactly, it's like a perfectionist thing, like there's always going to be some margin of error or like sliver that's not going to be exactly perfect. But I think that like that's what keeps you striving towards like living the closest to your values you can, but like accepting that like you'll probably be really miserable if your only objective is to get to 100% of my values all the time. Like you'll probably be a really rigid person.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I feel like there's something about privilege that comes up in what you like your reaction. Cause I was thinking about like me turning down a speaking engagement, for example. I can think of other times in my life where I wouldn't have been able to make that decision because I needed that money or I needed that opportunity for what I was doing. And I could also see times in my life where my family would expect me to make a different choice and would expect me to prioritize that because of what my goals were and what I was aspiring to. So I think it's really interesting too to think about like having the privilege to live into your values and how like not everyone has that privilege, especially consistently throughout their life. So I think that's one piece of it for sure. It's so hard to know when to bow to whatever's going on versus hold steadfast to your values. Like with that job that you left, or like with me leaving a job after a day. Like, yeah, I mean that there's a privilege there, I guess, too. But like, how did we know versus like staying in those jobs for weeks or months or years, possibly? Like, I don't know. What is that like sureness that you get? Is it a gut thing?
Was definitely a gut thing when I was feeling ill going into the office. And it was just, I physically couldn't, I knew that what we were doing was not being, well, in this case, it was working for an internet startup that was trying to collect health information and make it available to people and sell subscriptions to them, and trying to get people to give money. And it was trying to get them to give money for something that wasn't really of value. And I guess I'm a bad salesperson, but there are lines that I won't cross. I won't try to con someone out of money. I won't try to convince them of something that I don't believe.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Jess? Is it just a gut feeling or is it something else?
Um, I'm really like a very risk intolerant person. So usually it's discomfort. Like if I'm feeling like itchy about the decision because there's a lot of ambiguity behind it, like I don't know what comes next if I do this thing, that's usually the sign that like, right, like it's paired with that discomfort of like I feel icky about whatever the situation is. But also like I feel really indecisive because I don't know what will come next. That's usually like kind of a sign that probably like embracing the like ambiguity is the right move versus just staying still. Um,
Hmm.
like, I think that's what makes these types of decisions feel so difficult, is because many times it can feel like just sort of jumping into the void, like with you, Mike, like leaving your job after just 1 week. Like, you didn't know how long you were going to have to wait for the next opportunity. Like, there's so many questions and so many unknowns in those types of situations. They can make it really hard to make a decision for your values because it's like easier to just stay where you are, but then it's not easier because you're super uncomfortable or super unhappy or whatever else is going on that's unpleasant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's so much there about like how we feel internally and what we perceive externally about the context and like what our permission level is in that context and what our privilege is in that context. Like all of it goes into this big mixing pot about like how we even can make decisions. I think that yeah, keeping your values at the center of your life, I think is incredibly difficult to do. I think that that's like the harder path than just kind of going along with the flow. Yeah, Mike.
I do have to also say that, it was at a different time in my life. There was just my wife and me at that point, and I don't know that I would be able to do the same thing now with 2 kids as well.
Yeah, I think that like the way that we frame our values over time changes based on like how we have manifested our whole life, you know? We really change over time, it turns out. Sense making isn't a solo act. It's definitely a team sport. At the Sensemakers Club, we believe the best clarity comes through community. Our members gather online to unpack complex ideas, challenge assumptions, and grow together. Whether you're leading change or navigating one, there's a conversation waiting for you. Visit thesensemakersclub.com and use the code ILISTEN to get 50% off your first 3 months. Let's talk about other people. Ooh. What do you do when your values conflict with someone else's, especially when that person is close to you? Like how do you navigate that tension?
I don't know if I can say that how I navigate that tension is particularly a positive response to that tension. But I can share that my values now are really different than when they were in my teens and my early 20s. And in my teens and early 20s, my values matched my family's. And now, as a 40 something adult, they very much don't, especially in the climate that we find ourselves in these days, in this country. So unfortunately, my tactic in that situation with my family and is just avoidance, and it feels terrible. Like, um, like it, and I wish I could figure out. I'd love to figure out a better way of engaging. With my family, just knowing that like just we're kind of in direct opposition to what each of us value.
Mm.
I don't know that that's an answer to your question other than just like an honest confession. I just avoid them.
Yeah. No, I think that that's I actually have had that exact experience. So I very much resonate with what you're saying, Jessica. And I also am not good at this. Like I feel like when my values conflict with somebody, especially somebody that is important to me, like my family, it's incredibly hard to balance like can you stay in relations to a person who has values that are so different than your own? And to be honest with you, there's been family members of mine that I am no longer in contact with because of a difference of values. And unfortunately, that's as much from their side as it is from mine. And I feel like having my values called into question by others has been something that I haven't been able to like figure out, like, what exactly do you do at that point? Because I don't I don't see a world where I'm going to change them, but I also don't see a world where they're going to change me. And so then it becomes like, can there be a world where we can still be in relation? And for some people, the answer is yes. And I have had successful, like conflict free relationships with family members and close people that have different value sets. But to be honest, I think that my main tool has been avoidance. Like, I have one family member that like we're in communication, but there's a rule that we don't talk about that stuff. And like, I think about that all the time because I wouldn't have a friend, I don't think, especially a friend that I shared as much of myself with as that person that had that difference of values. But because this person is related to me, it's different. And so, yeah, I think thank you for admitting it. And yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I think too, like, and you just sort of might have to accept some level of like less depth to the relationship. Like it may just be difficult to have the type of relationship you desire when your values are so like juxtaposed to one another. I will say one thing, even when it's difficult, when another person's values are different from your own, I like to live by a philosophy that, like, if I feel like I should have a choice about something in myself or my life, that means that I have to give that to other people as well. So, like, other people are going to make choices for themselves that you don't like, and you're going to make choices for yourself that other people don't like. But we have to give one another that gift, whether we like other people's choices or not.
Yeah, exactly. And it is about other people's choices. Like how much of my disagreements with other people have to do with how I feel versus what they're actually doing to me or to other people. Like a lot of it has to do with how I feel. And like that's within my control of how I feel. I don't have to air that laundry all over the place. So let's talk about aspirational values right now. So, what's a value that you aspire to right now? Like one that you're maybe working towards, but you're not really living into just yet? Mine is being playful. Did you all learn how to play when you were kids? Like, was that something that was like a part of your childhood, like playing and active play?
Oh yeah, my mom used to like just put us outside and just say like you can come back in when the door's open.
Yeah. I have a similar thing, but mine was always like me in a book. It was like me in a book, me in a craft, me in a puzzle, but not a lot of playing. And now I have a kid, and like I've really realized, like he even said to me, probably about 2 years ago, he's probably about 4 when he said this. He said, "Mom, do you not know how to play?" And I was like so blown away that this little kid realized this about me, that like I just really don't know how to play. Like it's just not been like a big part of my life. And I think it has a lot to do with neurodivergence, and about like, background and stuff. But that's been a value recently that I really tried to lean into. Like I'm trying to be more playful in general, not just with him, but like with myself and also with like decisions, like holding things lightly and like laughing at hard things, like just being a little bit lighter. I think that that's been a big one for me. How about you guys? Anything you're aspiring to?
I aspire to be less serious. And I feel like everyone thinks of me as a fairly serious person because, similar to your comment about your son not, thinking that you don't know how to play. My kids, and they're older now, and they've only seen me as this person who's always, worried about what the next thing is for work and not having, and to some extent it is playful, not having a playful aspect of me that they ever witness. I was just on vacation last week and on the way back, because as my job title says, I know a guy, we encountered A friend of mine who I haven't seen since 1993. Hey, her name's Crystal. I only knew her from a time when we spent studying in France at the same language institute. So we only really knew each other for about 4 months. But she was telling these stories about things that happened at school while we were there, and me going on vacation. And I've told my kids that my vacation was hitchhiking across France, but she heard it from the perspective of somebody else.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, it's this crazy thing that he did. And, we expected that, we were never going to see him again because he was going someplace and didn't know anybody, and on and on. And my younger daughter was like, Dad, I had no idea that you were crazy when you were a kid.
I love that your kids got that understanding of you. That's such a different side. Jess, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if how we frame making as a value, but that's sort of where I think I would say my aspirations are right now. I think back to my younger self, in addition to playing outside, I was also doing lots of little kid crafts, like the little perler beads that you can melt down with the iron and make shapes and all kinds of little whatever. So I'm trying to get back into that because I think it also helps me with my connection, my value to have connection. So I can take art classes around the city, or even just this past weekend, I went to the library, and I didn't really talk to a whole lot of people there, but I went to a collage event. So, I maybe had 10 total minutes of conversation in the 2 hours that I was there, but most of us were just sitting quietly, cutting out awesome pictures and making art from the library's cast off. And yeah, so I value making things with my hands and spending time making things. There's something satisfying after an hour or two of just sitting down and being I created something, even if it's just dinner or reflection in my journal, or weird pictures from the library that I cut out and glued onto foam core. Just creating new things. It makes me happy. I feel like it can bring a sense of happiness for others who get to experience it, like my husband who gets to eat dinner when I make dinner.
Nice. That's awesome. I like that a lot. Well, this was a really fun conversation, you guys. I really appreciate you both jumping on. I really appreciate you being here. Do you ever feel like you're the only one that's trying to make sense of messy systems, shifting careers, and big life decisions? You're not. At the Sensemakers Club, we're a global community of curious humans who meet every single day to talk through the complex stuff together. It's like professional development meets real talk without the performance. Join a discussion, ask a better question, and stop making sense alone. Visit thesensemakersclub.com and use the code ILISTEN to get 50% off your first 3 months. Hope to see you soon, Sensemaker. Hey, Alfi.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Yeah, welcome back. I'm excited to tell you about this month. This month's conversation was about values. And I know that when you and I were working on the course, the Making Sense of Yourself course, we definitely have spent the most time nutsing and futzing with that module of all of them. Was the one that's about identifying your values, or ultimately what we came up with was your aspirations, and then how much you value those aspirations was what we aligned on. So yeah, it was a really interesting conversation to jump into. But first, I'd love to know current state of your thoughts on values. Where are you?
It's funny because I'm sort of at a stage where I have to think about values in the context of how you communicate them to other people. So I've shared a little bit with you about my vibe coding adventures. And you might almost say a parallel to that is kind of bringing together a couple of people who I think could work with me on on this project in the longer term. And one of the things that I need to be able to do when I'm kind of inviting people aboard is sort of what do we value as a group? Mm-hmm. What are the things that are accepted? What are the things that are required? And what is unacceptable? which is much harder than it looks, because values make a lot more sense in your own head when they don't need the constraint of words, compared to when you actually need to nail them down in a way that is both communicable and articulate. So that's been quite challenging for me. And, you might say that the program has given me a good foundation to start off with, but it's even with that, it's still a challenging sort of thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we could give you the tools all day long, but at the end of the day, you're like battling your demons in there. You know what I mean? Especially when like we got into the conversation about like misalignment and like overvaluing and undervaluing of our aspirations. And like, I just thought it was so interesting how like one person shared that they like left a job because they got there and within a few weeks, they just felt so values misaligned that they had to leave. But they also talked about how like, that's a choice that they maybe wouldn't be able to make later in their life, that it was like something that they made that decision like very early in their career. So I thought it was really interesting, just like the difference of your values over time and like what you're calling out in terms of like you have this one specific need for values alignment right now. And like your values work that we did 6 months ago when we were refining the course, or a year ago when we were putting it out the first time, like none of that necessarily is going to align one-to-one with what you're dealing with now. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And maybe just because you kind of like brought it up now, but the funny thing about values is like really, I would say the part of it that's really useful is in knowing the things that are not aligned. I think like knowing the value, in some sense, the values themselves are almost like, you can almost feel them out. You don't necessarily need to have the perfect words to be able to leverage them. But to be able to tell when a thing is misaligned, you really need to think about it, because there are many things that are kind of like sort of aligned, but then have one aspect to them that is not aligned. And it's very tempting to sort of say like, it's almost there. I can just kind of like, turn a blind eye. But being able to sense like the overvaluing and undervaluing of the aspiration is super important and difficult.
Yeah. I don't know, talking about like the role of having like a commitment, for example, to community, and how like an overvaluing of that becomes you becoming invaluable, where you're like so burnt out on being the center of a thing that, it doesn't work anymore. And yeah, I think that like being aware of that as one of the things that I tend towards is really important, especially in the position I find myself in now, where I'm like, I'm leading a thing. So I need to know if it's a thing that I'm like becoming invaluable in, as opposed to holding that value of community and being like community being a center in my life. I think there's a big difference between those things. So
yeah.
What are some that you've been grappling with?
Well, I mean, one of the things that it somewhat sits between maybe values and commitments, but kind of navigating the balance between my commitment to my professional life and my personal objective to sort of spend more time on my social and familial life. It's a thing I've been struggling with for quite a while, because I have the tendency to overwork and have maybe a little bit of an overactive imagination when it comes to the projects that I'd like to work on. But one of the things you and I have talked about is like, one of the commitments I made to myself is like, this year I really want to focus on my personal life, and kind of like, start making the necessary steps towards eventually having a family of my own. Which is easy to say when you're sitting in front of your journal and writing down these aspirations. And then when it actually comes down, but when it actually comes down to saying no to the opportunities that align with your professional goals, because they don't align with your immediate other goals, it becomes much harder, because they are aligned. They are aligned with like my professional objectives and the broader values that I've articulated.
Yeah.
But it's a different thing when a value and a priority are in conflict.
Exactly.
Because they're both aligned with you as an individual, but one of them is important and urgent, and the other one is just important and maybe right in front of you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the thing that I've been wrestling with.
Yeah. I shared on the episode that, do you remember that the speaking engagement that when my family was going to be in town? I agonized about that decision. And like, I remember mapping it out with you on a call on this, on the continuums with my values, and just being so mad that it had like made this decision for me. Cause it was a hard thing to say no. It was like a long-term client. I had done or like a regular thing for them, and it had come up in a regular fashion. And I was just like, oh crap, that's a conflict and I need to deal with it. And I'm so apt to just like make it work, and like try to do both. And what you end up doing is like not serving either side at all, and then just disappointing yourself in like other ways, in terms of like how you performed. So it was a really good conversation. I've been thinking a lot about like where we should take the conversation next. And I think burnout is the next conversation. I think like talking about those things in relation to each other, I think are really important. Because I think sometimes when you get into that overvalue or the undervalue side, that's where you're like creeping into your burnout territories.
One of the things I think that's also interesting is one of the results of COVID and lockdown is, I think, as a society, there was a new sort of light shined on the context of burnout. And now that we've more or less gone back to how we used to operate, I guess, like, I wonder how people are thinking about that question now.
Yeah.
As a result of having thought about the fact that burnout, it doesn't just come from being in the office all the time. It's sort of like, do you have the right proportion of aspects to your life that kind of make it holistic, both from like a variety perspective, but also from like a rest and effort perspective.
Exactly.
And now that everybody's somewhat kind of going back to maybe a schedule that's a little bit more familiar, are we thinking about how we approach that differently?
Right. Like, is it just like back to office, back to burnout? Like we're just doing that. I guess we're just doing that. I don't want to. It's
probably not a good idea.
No, like it really does seem like that though. It's like I don't know how it is your side, but on our side, like that really is kind of become a very clear mandate from many companies, is that you have to be in the office even 5 days a week at this point. And like, I don't see how we're going to avoid the burnout crisis that's going to be 6, 9, 12 months from now when those people are just aching for some support,
Yeah. And even I think broader than simply like burnout is sort of like the mental conflict, because it's one thing to be pushing yourself into that space when you can't conceptualize an alternative. It's a different thing to push yourself in that space when you know that there's an alternative.
Right. Yeah. But that alternative probably comes with drawbacks, I mean, whether that's like how much money you make or how much power you have or whatever it is, like, yeah. Having a values aligned job is definitely not the most lucrative thing that you can do.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of monies if you want to go against your values. I think that that's like, if there's anything clear to me about the corporate world, that is clear. Yeah.
I guess my perspective on the matter is somewhat similar, but slightly different. For me, it's like the only way to have a values aligned job is to start your own business.
Yeah, man.
It's like, this
so
is just...
here I am having my own business, and I still like, I have to remain dogged about my values, and still that's not the most lucrative choice again. Like, so it's
True.
The values aligned.
It's hard either way.
Yeah, it's like, what kind of hard do you want? Do you want the hard that like you have trouble sleeping at night, or do you want the hard where you have trouble sleeping at night?
It's just for different reasons.
Which hard do you want? I have had both hards. I can't recommend either one highly enough, really. Like, they're both hard.
Mm. Sure. That is a sobering thought.
I'm sorry.
But I do think the trouble sleeping because of financial difficulty and trouble sleeping because of ethical difficulty, to me, that's an easy choice and a hard reality.
Yeah. Either direction.
Well, no. For me, the moral one is a non-starter. I'd much rather
Yeah, me
the
too.
difficulty on the financial side. Well,
Yeah.
it's also easy to say that when you don't actually have the decision right in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I have like a decision in front of me necessarily, but I do think like, I have the realities of my decisions in front of me. And yeah, it is something that I think about every day.
Sure.
I am the chief sense maker of an organization of no less than 150 something people. So it's all of a sudden become like my values and my projection of those values is not just about me anymore. It's about other people. Yeah. So yeah, values are hard. They're a really tough subject. If you're curious, stuck, or somewhere in between, the Sensemakers Club is for you. We host peer-led conversations every weekday about things that don't come with easy answers, like capitalism, complexity, neurodiversity, and change. Not gurus, no grind, just thoughtful people asking better questions. Ready to think out loud with folks who actually listen? Visit thesensemakersclub.com and use the code ILISTEN to get 50% off your first 3 months. So, I think it's time. I think we should get into how made sense of are you this month, Alfi?
I have to say, July was a very important month for me. I won't get into too much of the detail, but I have a sibling that has a genetic illness, which I might have spoken about here before. And one of the significant challenges of that is, there'll come a time where it'll be up to, myself and my siblings to help manage that. And I think I got a little bit of a taste of what that will look like in the future, and kind of knowing that I can kind of face up to it and kind of do so effectively, I think it feels good to know that I can do that. And so, with that in mind, the challenges of today are relatively insignificant.
Yeah. Gotcha. So you're like, well, everything's crazy, but I did my responsibilities last month, and now I have a little bit of space back. Yeah. I'm happy you got to have that experience. I'm happy he got to have that experience too. No, I feel like that's because like that, there's that experience on that side. I mean, we don't have to talk too much about it, but I just feel like that's got to be like a relief on that side too.
Probably.
That you got him. Yeah.
Turning the camera the other way around, Abby, how made sense of are you right now?
So I feel like one of the reasons that we ask ourselves this question at the end of every episode is because it is such an up and down of being made sense of. And like, you can quickly feel like you're falling away from yourself. You know what I mean? And I feel like last month I went back and listened to what I said, and I was like, and I'm really fine. Like everything's like good. And like, then I had like a remarkably hard month. I just like hit a bunch of personal stuff with family and with my kid, and just like stuff that was completely uncontrollable by me. That ultimately led me down the path of feeling a lot of like loss of control of like how I'm feeling. And in the same time frame, and this is something that I'm sure many people have dealt with as well, I've been having a medication management issue Mainly that I thought that I was fine, so I stopped taking a medication. So I shouldn't have done that. I learned a lesson, and I am now taking it again, which is good. But the ramifications of that were, fairly real in terms of side effects. I stopped taking it because of side effects. I was sort of like doing the risk to benefit ratio. And I was feeling like I was in a really strong place, and I misrepresented what the medication was doing for me. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's like too much information for anybody, but I just feel like it's something that I wish I heard people talk about when it came to mental health challenges. Like, take your meds. And when you don't think you should take your meds anymore, you should talk to your doctor about that, not just stop taking your meds. And so, yeah, I am on this podcast admitting that I stopped taking my meds this month, and it was a big mistake. And I'm coming out of that mistake, and I feel good to come out of it, but I also feel like still very unsure about like what that means. And, the side effects of this particular medication are real. And so I'm just living with it, but apparently it was working in terms of what it was prescribed to do. So, and it is no longer, it's no longer a question in my mind about what its role was, but yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah. I guess, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the courage it takes to talk about the downs, especially on the back of an up.
Yes.
Yeah, it's already hard enough to talk about the things that are not going well.
Yeah.
But when people have a sense that, everything's going great, it can be tempting to avoid kind of being open and honest about that, especially about a subject matter that is so personal and, not everybody can relate to.
Right.
So I think it's important that you're willing to share that and courageous. And I think, it's obviously comes from an entirely different angle, but managing medication is a whole other challenge that comes with actually dealing with the illness. And, I can relate to that personally from my own background, but I think also my brother faces a different but similar sort of challenge. Mm-hmm. And I know that I am definitely not ready to talk about that. So it's encouraging to hear you do so.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely almost canceled. That almost happened. Like, I was just like, if I could just push this off by like a week, I could probably feel better enough to not talk about it. And then I thought about lying. So that came up. Like, do I just craft a whole narrative? Because like, unfortunately, we have a podcast where we meet and have this part where somebody asks me, somebody who's close to me, who knows me, that also has called me out when I have been lying to myself or him in the past, like ask me an honest question about myself. And like, could I lie if you asked me that? And like, probably, but that would be so out of line with like who I am and who I want to be. So yeah, it sucks. It sucks to like have a podcast, stick to the schedule, and have it be that 1 month you are good, and the next month, by your own actions, you are no longer good. I know I'm not the only person that struggles with this particular thing. Like, if you're neurodivergent and you have mental health struggles, then medication management is a part of your life, and the side effects part of it is not to be understated. And yeah, it can be like, well, okay, I feel like a better, like, mentally health wise version of myself, but like physically I feel worse. How is that? How do you make the decision on like which one to trade? It's like, going back to that values alignment thing. It's like, I don't know if I can have a values alignment conversation between my body feeling good and my brain working. It shouldn't be a choice that I have to make, but it seems like that is the choice that I have to make. So I'm going to choose my brain doing what it's supposed to do better. And then try to like manage the symptoms the best I can.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Making decisions about your values when your environment is in conflict with your values is one thing. Making a decision about your values when different parts of yourself are in conflict is an entirely different thing.
Exactly. So yeah, a somber update. Yeah. You have chaos and I have somber. So that's what we have for you this month, listeners. This chaos, somber chaos.